I spent 60 years being the glue that held my family together. I raised 5 children, helped with countless grandchildren, and never asked for anything in return. But when I needed them most, when cancer knocked on my door at 72, they showed me who they really were. What they did next didn't just break my heart, it changed everything I thought I knew about family. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you loved most, or if you're someone who believes family should stick together through thick and thin, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about human nature. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. My name is Betty, and I'm 74 years old now. When people look at me, they see a small, quiet woman with grey hair and tired eyes. But I wasn't always this way. I used to be the kind of person who could handle anything life threw at me. I married my husband, Frank, when I was just 19. He was 21, fresh out of the military, with dreams of building something big. We didn't have much money, but we had love and determination. That had to be enough, because it was all we had. Our first child, Michael, came along when I was 21. Then came Lisa 2 years later, followed by Tommy, Grace, and finally little Anthony. 5 children in 8 years. Frank worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, and I took care of everything else. Let me tell you what everything else meant in those days. I woke up at 5 in the morning to pack Frank's lunch and get his work clothes ready. I'd feed the baby, get the older kids dressed for school, walk them to the bus stop, and then spend my days cleaning, cooking, and taking care of whoever was sick that week. In the evenings, I helped with homework while dinner cooked on the stove. I mended clothes by hand because we couldn't afford new ones. I grew vegetables in our small backyard to stretch our grocery budget. I made Halloween costumes from old sheets and Christmas presents from whatever I could find or make. When the kids got older, I took a part-time job at the local grocery store. I worked the evening shift so I could still be home when they got off the school bus. Frank would watch them for those few hours, and I'd bring home my small paycheck and the day-old bread and dented cans the manager let employees take for free. But here's what I remember most about those early years. We were happy, really, truly happy. Sure, money was tight and we worried about bills, but we had each other. Sunday dinners around our small kitchen table were loud and messy and perfect. The kids knew I was the one who made everything work. When they scraped their knees, they ran to me. When they had bad dreams, they climbed into my side of the bed. When they needed someone to listen to their problems, they knew I'd always have time, even if I was exhausted. Michael struggled in high school with his grades. His father wanted to punish him, but I spent hours every night sitting at that kitchen table, helping him understand his assignments. I never gave up on him, even when his teachers said he might not graduate. Lisa went through a rebellious phase at 16. She started hanging out with the wrong crowd, staying out past curfew, and talking back to her father. Frank wanted to ground her indefinitely, but I knew that would only make things worse. Instead, I talked to her, really talked to her. I found out she was struggling because she felt like she didn't fit in anywhere. We worked through it together, just the 2 of us. Tommy broke his leg in a football accident his senior year. The doctors said he might not walk normally again. While Frank worked overtime to pay the medical bills, I drove Tommy to physical therapy 3 times a week for 6 months. I sat in that waiting room every single session, and when he wanted to quit because it hurt too much, I was the one who convinced him to keep trying. Grace had her heart broken by her first boyfriend when she was 17. She cried in my arms for hours, convinced her life was over. I held her and told her about my own teenage heartbreaks and how the pain would pass. I helped her understand that one boy's inability to see her worth said nothing about her value as a person, and Anthony, my youngest, was always getting into trouble. Not bad trouble, just the kind of mischief that comes from being too smart and too curious for his own good. I was constantly getting calls from school, constantly having to explain to Frank why Anthony had taken apart the neighbor's radio or tried to build a rocket in the garage. Through it all, I was the constant. I was the one who remembered everyone's favorite foods, who kept track of doctor appointments, who made sure birthdays were celebrated, and holidays felt special, even when we couldn't afford much. When Frank got laid off from his factory job during the recession in the 80s, I took on extra shifts at the grocery store and started cleaning houses on weekends. I never complained, never made the kids feel guilty about the sacrifices. I just did what needed to be done. The kids saw all of this. They saw how hard I worked, how much I gave up for our family, and they seemed to appreciate it, at least back then. As the kids grew up and started their own families, I thought I'd finally get to rest a little. Frank and I had managed to buy a small house. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. We'd paid off the mortgage after 30 years of never missing a payment. But rest wasn't really in the cards for me. Instead of taking care of 5 children, I found myself taking care of 5 adult children and their problems. When Michael got divorced, he moved back in with us for 8 months. He was depressed and angry, and Frank didn't have patience for his mood swings, so I became the peacekeeper, the one who listened to Michael's pain and helped him figure out how to start over at 35. When Lisa's husband lost his job, they couldn't make their mortgage payments. Frank and I loaned them $8,000, money we'd saved for years from my part-time work. We never saw that money again, but Lisa's family kept their house, and that's what mattered to me. Tommy's wife left him when their youngest was only 3 years old. Suddenly, he was a single father who didn't know how to braid hair or pack school lunches or handle bedtime routines. So I stepped in. I watched little Connor after school, helped with his homework, taught him to tie his shoes, and made sure he knew he was loved, even though his mum had walked away. Grace struggled with depression after her second miscarriage. She'd call me crying at all hours, and I'd drop everything to drive over to her apartment and just sit with her. I helped her find a therapist, went with her to appointments when she was too scared to go alone, and spent countless hours on the phone talking her through her darkest moments. Anthony had addiction problems. This was the hardest one for me to handle because I felt so helpless. He'd disappear for weeks at a time, and I'd lie awake worrying if he was alive or dead. When he finally got clean and went to rehab, I was the one who picked him up from the treatment center, who helped him find a job, who believed in him when nobody else would. During all of this, I was also becoming a grandmother, and let me tell you, being a grandmother was the greatest joy of my life. Michael had 2 kids, Lisa had 3, Tommy had Connor, and Grace eventually had twins after years of trying. Anthony wasn't ready for kids yet, but he was getting his life together. I wasn't just any grandmother, though. I was the grandmother who babysat every weekend so the parents could have date nights. I was the one who picked kids up from school when parents had to work late. I was the one who remembered every birthday, every school play, every soccer game. When Frank started showing signs of dementia, I became his caregiver too. The man I'd loved for 50 years slowly disappeared, but his body remained. I helped him dress, reminded him to eat, kept him safe when he wandered around confused in the middle of the night. The kids tried to help at first, but as Frank got worse, they found excuses to visit less often. It was too hard for them to see their strong father becoming so vulnerable. So once again, I handled it alone. I spent 3 years watching the love of my life forget who I was. Do you know what it's like to care for someone who looks at you like you're a stranger? Someone who sometimes gets scared of you because they don't understand why this unfamiliar woman is in their house. But I did it because that's what you do for family. That's what love means. Showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Frank passed away on a Tuesday morning in March. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath. The kids all came to the funeral, of course, and they stayed for a few days to help me with arrangements. But then they went back to their lives, and I was alone in that house for the first time in 53 years. 2 years after Frank passed away, I found a lump in my breast during a shower. I was 72 years old, and I'd never had any serious health problems before, but I knew immediately that this was different. This was something bad. I made an appointment with my doctor, but I didn't tell the kids right away. I didn't want to worry them until I knew for sure what we were dealing with. Looking back, maybe that was a mistake. Maybe I should have prepared them for what was coming. The doctor sent me for a mammogram, then a biopsy, then more tests. Each appointment felt like a step deeper into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The waiting was the worst part. Sitting in those sterile waiting rooms, watching the clock tick by, wondering if I was about to get a death sentence. When the oncologist finally called me into his office, I knew before he even spoke. His face told me everything I needed to know. Breast cancer, stage 2, aggressive type. We needed to act fast. I remember sitting in that chair, listening to him explain treatment options, and thinking about how I was going to tell my children. How do you tell the people you love most that you might be dying? I called a family meeting for that Sunday. I cooked a big dinner, roast beef with all the sides, just like I used to make when they were kids. I wanted to give them something good before I gave them something terrible. After dinner, when everyone was relaxed and full, I told them. I watched their faces change as I explained the diagnosis, the treatment plan, the uncertain future. Lisa started crying immediately. Grace got very quiet. The boys tried to stay strong, but I could see the fear in their eyes. Anthony spoke first. "What do you need from us, Mom?" "Whatever it is, we'll do it." The others nodded and made promises. They'd take turns driving me to appointments. They'd help with groceries and housework. They'd make sure I wasn't alone during treatment. For the first time since Frank died, I felt like I wasn't carrying everything by myself. My children were going to take care of me the way I'd taken care of them all those years. The chemotherapy started 3 weeks later. I'd never been so sick in my life. The nausea was constant and overwhelming. I couldn't keep food down for days at a time. My hair fell out in clumps. I was weak and dizzy, and felt like I was dying slowly. But my children kept their promises, at least at first. Michael drove me to my first few treatments. Lisa brought soup and sat with me when I was too sick to get out of bed. Tommy mowed my lawn and helped with small repairs around the house. Grace organized my medications and made sure I was taking everything correctly. For about 2 months, everything worked exactly like we'd planned. I felt supported and cared for. I started to think that maybe this terrible thing was actually going to bring our family closer together. But then things started to change in small ways. Michael had to cancel a few appointments because of work emergencies. Lisa's visits became shorter and less frequent. Tommy stopped coming by as regularly. Grace seemed distracted when she did help. I understood. I really did. They had their own lives, their own responsibilities. I didn't want to be a burden, so I started telling them I was feeling better than I actually was. I downplayed my symptoms and insisted I could handle more things on my own. The truth was, I was terrified, not just of dying, but of being alone while I was dying. The house felt so empty during those long days between treatments. I'd sit in Frank's old chair, too weak to do much of anything, and count the hours until someone might call or visit. The medical bills started piling up. Even with Medicare, cancer treatment is expensive. I had co-pays for doctor visits, prescription costs, and payments for procedures that weren't fully covered. My savings account, which Frank and I had built slowly over 40 years, began to shrink rapidly. I didn't want to worry the kids with financial problems on top of everything else, so I tried to handle it myself. I cut back on everything I could. I stopped eating out completely. even the occasional coffee with my neighbor. I turned the heat down to save on utilities. I bought generic groceries and skipped things that weren't absolutely necessary. But it wasn't enough. The bills kept coming, and my fixed income couldn't keep up with the costs. I was looking at potentially losing my house, the house Frank and I had worked so hard to pay off, the house that held 50 years of memories. 6 months into treatment, I finally had to ask my children for help. It was one of the hardest conversations I'd ever had. I called them all over to the house and explained my financial situation. I showed them the bills, the insurance statements, the diminishing bank balance. I wasn't asking for charity. This was my family, and we'd always helped each other through tough times. I'd helped all of them financially over the years when they needed it. Now I needed help, and I trusted they would be there for me. Their reaction surprised me. Instead of immediately offering to help, they started asking questions about my spending, my insurance coverage, whether I'd looked into government assistance programs. Lisa suggested I consider selling the house and moving into a senior living facility. I tried to explain that this house wasn't just a building to me. It was where I'd raised my children, where Frank and I had built our life together, where all my memories lived. Moving would feel like giving up on everything that had ever mattered to me. But they didn't seem to understand. They kept talking about practical solutions and facing reality. Michael said maybe it was time for me to downsize my lifestyle. Grace suggested I look into clinical trials that might provide free treatment. By the end of that conversation, nothing was resolved. They said they needed time to think about how they could help, to look at their own finances and see what was possible. I went to bed that night, feeling more alone than I had since Frank died. For the first time, I started to wonder if I really knew my children at all. The next few weeks were strange. My children's behavior became even more distant and uncomfortable. They still called to check on me, but the conversations felt different. Shorter, more formal, like they were checking items off a list rather than actually connecting with me. When Lisa visited, she spent most of the time looking around the house, commenting on how much work it needed. The roof had some missing shingles from the last storm. The kitchen cabinets were old, and the carpet in the living room was worn from decades of foot traffic. Michael started asking odd questions about my finances. He wanted to know about my bank accounts, my investments, whether Frank had left any life insurance money. He said he was trying to help me organize everything, but something about his tone felt wrong. Tommy brought up the house value several times. He'd looked up recent sales in the neighborhood and seemed very interested in what my property might be worth. When I asked why it mattered, he said it was good to know for planning purposes. Grace started talking about power of attorney. She said that with my health problems, it might be smart to give someone legal authority to make decisions if I became too sick to handle things myself. She offered to take on that responsibility, saying it would be one less thing for me to worry about. Anthony was the only one who seemed genuinely focused on my health and well-being. He'd sit with me during the bad days after chemo, help me to the bathroom when I was too weak to walk steadily, and make sure I was eating even when food made me nauseous. But even Anthony seemed to be having whispered conversations with his siblings that stopped when I entered the room. I started to feel like there was something going on that I wasn't being told about. One evening, about 7 months into my treatment, I overheard a phone conversation Lisa was having in my kitchen. She thought I was sleeping, but I'd gotten up to get some water and heard her voice. "I know it's hard to think about," she was saying, "but we have to be realistic. The medical bills are just going to keep getting worse, and she's not getting any younger. The house is sitting there losing value while she's spending money she doesn't have on treatments that might not even work." I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding, listening to my daughter discuss my life like I was already gone. "Michael talked to a real estate agent," she continued. "The house could sell for at least $200,000. maybe more with some improvements. That money could pay for much better care than she's getting now, and there'd be enough left over for a nice apartment or assisted living place. I felt sick, and not from the chemo. My own children were planning to sell my house without even talking to me about it. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Wednesday evening, and I'd had a particularly bad day after treatment. I was weak and nauseous and had spent most of the day in bed. Around 8 o'clock, I heard voices in my living room. I thought maybe one of the kids had come to check on me, but when I listened more carefully, I realized there were multiple voices. I heard Michael, Lisa, Tommy, and Grace all talking quietly. They were having a family meeting in my living room while I was sick in bed, and they hadn't bothered to include me or even tell me they were there. I put on my robe and walked slowly to the hallway where I could hear them better. What I heard shattered everything I thought I knew about my children. The power of attorney gives us the authority we need, Grace was saying. I've talked to a lawyer, and as long as we can show that she's not capable of making sound financial decisions, we can act on her behalf. But is she really incapable? Tommy asked. I mean, she seems pretty clear about wanting to stay here. Michael's voice was cold when he responded. Look at the bank statements, Tommy. She's spending money she doesn't have on medical treatments that probably won't work anyway. At her age, with this type of cancer, what are we really fighting for? Another year, 2 years. Don't be so heartless, Lisa said, but her tone wasn't truly disapproving. But Michael has a point. The medical bills are eating up everything she and Dad worked for. If we don't act soon, there won't be anything left. Left for what? Anthony's voice. He'd been quiet up until then. Left for who? This is Mum's money, and this is Mum's house. She should get to decide how it's used. Anthony, you're not thinking practically, Grace responded. She's 72 years old with cancer. Even if the treatment works, she's going to need increasing levels of care. This house is too big, too much work, and too isolated. She'd be better off somewhere with medical staff and other people her age. Better off for who? Anthony asked again, because it sounds like you're more worried about preserving an inheritance than taking care of Mum. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Michael spoke. That's not fair, Anthony. We all love Mum, but we also have to think about the future. I've got 2 kids heading to college. Lisa's struggling with her mortgage payments. Tommy's raising Connor on his own. Grace is dealing with her own financial problems. We're not saying we want Mum to die. We're saying we want to make sure her money is used wisely, so everyone can benefit. Everyone except Mum, Anthony said quietly. I stood in that hallway, listening to my children discuss selling my house and moving me into assisted living, like I was a problem to be solved, rather than a person with feelings and preferences. I've already talked to a real estate agent, Michael continued. The market is good right now, and this neighborhood is becoming popular with young families. We could probably get $250 for the house. Maybe more if we do some basic improvements first. How do we handle the legal aspects? Grace asked. The power of attorney covers it, she answered herself. I can sign the paperwork as her legal representative. We'll find a nice assisted living place, nothing too expensive, but somewhere clean and safe. The remaining money can be divided among the family to help with immediate needs, and we'll set aside enough to cover her care for several years. What if she fights us on this? Tommy asked. She won't have a choice, Michael said. Grace has legal authority now. And honestly, if she's not thinking clearly enough to see that this is the best solution, that just proves she needs someone else making decisions for her. I felt like I was going to collapse. These were my children, the babies I'd nursed, the toddlers I'd comforted, the teenagers I'd guided, the adults I'd supported through every crisis they'd ever faced, and they were planning to steal my home and my independence while I was dying. But Anthony wasn't done fighting. "This is wrong," he said firmly. "I don't care about the legalities or the practical concerns. This is Mum's life, and she should get to live it how she wants. If she wants to spend her last years in this house, if she wants to use her money fighting cancer, that's her choice to make." "Anthony, you're being emotional and unrealistic," Grace said. "No, I'm being human. The rest of you are being vultures." I heard someone stand up abruptly. "That's enough," Michael said. "Anthony, if you're not willing to think about what's best for the family as a whole, then maybe you shouldn't be part of these discussions." "What's best for the family?" Anthony's voice was rising. "Mum is the family. She's the one who held us all together our entire lives. She's the one who sacrificed everything so we could have what we needed. And now that she needs us, we're going to throw her away." "Nobody's throwing anyone away," Lisa said defensively. "We're making sure she gets proper care." "No, you're making sure you get your inheritance before medical bills eat it up. Be honest about what this really is." "I think you should leave," Michael said. "Fine. But I'm telling you right now, I won't be part of this. And if you go through with it, don't expect me to pretend we're still a family." I heard footsteps heading toward the door, and then Anthony was gone. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I had learned. My children, 4 of my 5 children, were planning to take everything from me. They were going to use my illness and my trust against me to steal my home and my independence. The next morning, they all acted completely normal. Lisa brought me breakfast and asked how I was feeling. Grace helped me sort through my medications. Michael fixed a squeaky door hinge. Tommy mowed the lawn. None of them mentioned the meeting they'd had in my living room. None of them asked what I wanted or how I felt about my future. They just went about their day, preparing to betray me while pretending to care for me. That's when I realized that the cancer wasn't the thing that was going to kill me. It was the betrayal by my own children that was destroying me from the inside out. But I wasn't dead yet, and I wasn't going to go down without a fight. After that terrible night, I knew I had to act fast. But I also knew I had to be smart about it. My children thought they were dealing with a sick, helpless old woman who couldn't think clearly anymore. They were about to learn that 72 years of life had taught me a few things about survival. The first thing I did was call Anthony. I waited until the next afternoon when I knew the others wouldn't be around, and I asked him to come over for coffee. When he arrived, I could see the pain in his eyes. The family meeting had clearly affected him deeply. He sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework so many years ago, and I could tell he was struggling with what to say. "Anthony," I said quietly, "I heard you all talking last night." His face went white. "Mum, I'm so sorry. I tried to stop them. I really did. I can't believe they're even considering this." "I know you did, sweetheart, and I want you to know how much that means to me. But now I need your help with something, and I need you to keep it completely secret from your brothers and sister." "Anything, Mom. What do you need?" "I need you to help me protect myself. They think I'm too sick and confused to fight back, but they're wrong. I've been taking care of this family for 60 years, and I'm not about to let them destroy me now." Over the next hour, I told Anthony exactly what I'd overheard and what I suspected they were planning. He was shocked by how detailed their scheme was, how coldly they'd discuss my future without any regard for my feelings or wishes. The next day, I called a lawyer, not the family lawyer who'd handled Frank's estate. I didn't trust that news of my visit wouldn't get back to my children. Instead, I found a different attorney who specialized in elder law and estate planning. Her name was Patricia Morgan, and she was probably in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I explained my situation honestly, my cancer diagnosis, my financial struggles with medical bills, and my children's plan to sell my house and move me into assisted living against my wishes. "Mrs. Johnson," she said after hearing my story, "I want to be very clear about something. Having cancer doesn't make you legally incompetent. Being elderly doesn't make you legally incompetent. As long as you understand the nature and consequences of your decisions, you have every right to make choices about your own life, even if other people disagree with those choices." Over the next 2 hours, we worked on several important documents. I revoked the power of attorney I'd given Grace and made it clear that I was retaining all decision-making authority for myself. We updated my will to reflect my current wishes. And let me tell you, those wishes had changed significantly after learning about my children's betrayal. I also set up what's called a revocable trust. This would protect my house and remaining assets while still allowing me to control them during my lifetime. Most importantly, it included very specific instructions about what should happen if I became incapacitated. Anthony would be my successor trustee, not Grace. If I became unable to make decisions for myself, Anthony would have the authority to act on my behalf, but only in accordance with written instructions I was leaving about my preferences for care. Those instructions were very clear. I wanted to remain in my own home as long as possible. I wanted medical decisions made based on quality of life, not just extending life at any cost. And I absolutely did not want to be moved into any facility unless it became medically necessary, and I was truly unable to care for myself. The most important thing we discussed was something called a living trust amendment. This would allow me to change how my assets would be distributed after my death, and my children wouldn't know about the changes until it was too late for them to contest it. I thought long and hard about this decision. These were my children, and despite everything they'd done, I still loved them. But love doesn't mean being a doormat. Love doesn't mean letting people take advantage of your kindness and generosity. After everything I'd given them over the years, after all the sacrifices I'd made, they were willing to steal from me while I was dying. That wasn't love. That was greed, disguised as concern. So I made some changes to my will that I think were fair under the circumstances. Anthony, who'd stood up for me when the others were planning my betrayal, would inherit the house and the majority of my remaining assets. He'd also receive all of Frank's tools and personal items that had sentimental value. The other 4 children would each receive $5,000, enough to show that I hadn't forgotten them, but not enough to reward their betrayal. The rest of my estate would go to my grandchildren's education funds, with Anthony as the trustee to make sure the money was actually used for education and not absorbed by their parents for other purposes. I also included a letter to be read after my death, explaining exactly why I'd made these decisions. I wanted my children to understand that their actions had consequences, and I wanted my grandchildren to someday know the truth about what had happened. When all the legal work was finished, I felt stronger than I had in months. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was someone fighting back against injustice. I decided to wait a few days before telling my children about revoking the power of attorney. I wanted to see how they would behave, whether they would continue pretending to care about my well-being while secretly planning my downfall. Their behavior over those few days told me everything I needed to know. Grace came by with more brochures for assisted living facilities. She spread them out on my kitchen table and went through each one, pointing out amenities like they were selling vacation packages. Michael came by the next day with a contractor friend of his. They walked around the house for an hour, making notes and taking measurements. When I asked what they were doing, Michael said they were just assessing what repairs might be needed for safety reasons. But I heard them talking about square footage and market comparisons. The final straw came on Friday evening. Michael, Lisa, Tommy and Grace all arrived together at my house. They'd coordinated this visit, which meant they were planning something significant. "Mom," Michael said, we need to talk to you about something important." They sat down in my living room and I took my usual chair, Frank's old recliner. Grace spoke first. "Mum, we've been doing a lot of thinking about your situation, and we've come up with a plan that we think will solve all your problems." "What problems?" I asked innocently. "Well, the medical bills, the house maintenance, your safety living alone. We think we've found a way to address all of these concerns." Lisa jumped in. "We found a beautiful assisted living community about 20 minutes from here. They have an opening next month, and it would be perfect for you." "And how exactly do you propose I pay for this?" I asked. Michael cleared his throat. "That's the brilliant part of the plan. We can sell the house. It's worth way more than you'd ever use for medical care. The proceeds would easily cover several years in assisted living, with money left over for your other needs." "And what if I don't want to move?" I asked quietly. They exchanged glances. Michael spoke for the group. "Mum, we love you, but you're not thinking clearly about this situation. The stress of your illness is affecting your judgment. This is the best solution for everyone." "For everyone? Or for you?" The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once, voices raised, accusations flying. Michael said I was being unreasonable and paranoid. Lisa said they were only trying to help. Tommy said I wasn't capable of making good decisions anymore. Grace said I was putting everyone in an impossible position. Finally, I held up my hand for silence. "I have something to tell you," I said. "Yesterday, I went to a lawyer and revoked the power of attorney I gave Grace. I am not moving out of this house. I am not selling my home. And I am not allowing any of you to make decisions about my life without my consent." The shock on their faces would have been comical if it weren't so tragic. "You can't do that," Grace sputtered. "You're not thinking clearly. You need someone to make responsible decisions for you." "I am thinking more clearly than I have in months," I replied. "Clear enough to see that my own children are planning to steal from me while I'm dying." One by one they left. Grace was the last to go, stopping at the door to look back at me. "Mom, I hope someday you'll understand that we were just trying to love you the best way we knew how." "No, Grace," I replied. "You were trying to control me the easiest way you knew how." "There's a difference." After they were gone, I sat back down in Frank's chair and cried, not from sadness, but from relief. I'd finally stood up for myself. The next few weeks were the loneliest of my life, but also the most empowering. My 4 children didn't call, didn't visit, didn't check on my health or my treatment. Their silence spoke volumes about what really mattered to them. But Anthony called every day. He came by several times a week, helped with groceries and housework, drove me to medical appointments when I needed it. He proved that at least one of my children understood what family really meant. I started making changes to take control of my life. I hired a housekeeping service to come twice a month. I ordered meals from a local service that delivered healthy, pre-prepared dinners. I bought myself some new clothes and started spending money on things that brought me joy. Word got back to my other children about my spending sprees, and they weren't happy. But it was my money, and I was finally putting my own needs first. Over the next several months, my children's true characters became clear through their actions. Michael eventually came back and apologized sincerely. He acknowledged that they'd been planning my life without including me, and admitted that part of it was about money. We slowly rebuilt our relationship based on honesty instead of control. Lisa took longer to come around, but she eventually did. She focused on rebuilding our emotional connection rather than trying to manage my life. Tommy never apologized. He continued to act like I was overreacting and causing unnecessary drama. Our relationship remained distant and strained. Grace swung back and forth between trying to rebuild our relationship and trying to regain control over my decisions. The final straw came when she went behind my back to talk to my oncologist about my mental competency. When I found out, I confronted her immediately. "Why did you call my doctor behind my back?" Her face flushed red. "I was worried about you. Some of the decisions you've been making seem impulsive." "Those aren't medical decisions, Grace. And they're not impulsive. They're carefully considered choices based on what I want for my own life. I can't just sit back and watch you make choices that I think are wrong." "Yes, you can. That's exactly what you can do. You can respect me enough to let me live my own life, even if you disagree with how I'm living it." Through all of this, Anthony remained my constant support. He never judged my decisions, never tried to manipulate me, never made me feel like a burden or a problem to be solved. A year and a half after my cancer diagnosis, I got news that changed everything. The treatment had worked better than anyone expected. The tumors had shrunk significantly, and my oncologist was cautiously optimistic about my long-term prognosis. "I'm not saying you're cured, doctor," Peterson explained. "Cancer is unpredictable and will need to continue monitoring you closely, but your response to treatment has been remarkable for someone your age." I walked out of that appointment feeling like I'd been given a second chance at life, not just to live longer, but to live better, to live on my own terms. The first person I called was Anthony. The second person was Michael, who'd been genuinely supportive throughout my treatment. The third was Lisa, who cried with relief when I told her the news. But the most surprising reaction came from Tommy and Grace. When they learned that I might be around for several more years, spending more of their money on my own care and happiness, their disappointment was barely concealed. It was a sobering reminder of what really mattered to some of my children. But there was also unexpected joy during this time. I reconnected with old friends, joined a book club, took painting classes, and even started traveling. For the first time in decades, I had a social life that didn't revolve around my family's needs and crises. 2 years after my diagnosis, I shocked everyone by planning a trip to Ireland, a place I'd always dreamed of visiting. When my children heard about my travel plans, their reactions were predictable. Tommy thought I was being reckless. Grace worried about the expense. But Michael supported my decision, and Anthony was enthusiastic. I spent 3 weeks in Ireland, and it was everything I'd hoped it would be, and more. Most importantly, I proved to myself that I was still capable of new experiences, still able to adapt and learn and grow. 3 years after my cancer diagnosis, something happened that revealed the true nature of my children's hearts, once and for all. I had a minor fall down my front steps, just missed the last step and scraped my knee. But suddenly, all my children were very interested in my well-being again. Within a week, Grace showed up with power of attorney paperwork again. Tommy started talking about safer housing options, and Lisa took an emotional approach about how much they worried. They were using my minor accident as another opportunity to try controlling my life and accessing my assets. I called one final family meeting. "I asked you all to come here today because I want to address this ongoing campaign to get me out of my house," I said once they were seated. I explained that I'd done financial planning with a professional advisor. If I lived for another 10 years and remained in my own home, I'd spend approximately the same amount of money as I would on assisted living. The only way there would be significantly more money left for inheritance would be if I died sooner rather than later. And if that's what any of you are hoping for, you need to examine your priorities, I said. "Mom, none of us want you to die," Grace protested. "Then stop acting like you're counting on it. Stop making plans for my money like I'm already gone." That meeting marked the final turning point. Michael and Lisa took my words to heart and made genuine efforts to build relationships based on respect. Tommy and Grace struggled more with accepting my autonomy, but they at least stopped openly campaigning against me. 5 years after my cancer diagnosis, I'm still here. I'm still living in my own house, still making my own decisions, still refusing to let other people control my life. My relationship with my children is complicated, but it's honest in a way it never was before. Michael and I have grown closer. Lisa and I have rebuilt our connection slowly. Anthony remains my closest confidant and strongest supporter. Tommy and I have a cordial but distant relationship, and Grace and I are still working things out. I've learned something important about money and family. Money doesn't corrupt people. It reveals who they already are. The inheritance I might leave behind brought out greed in some of my children that was always there, just hidden. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. I'm stronger, more independent, more willing to put my own needs first. Some people might see these changes as sad, but I see them as necessary growth, finally learning to value myself the way I'd always valued everyone else. I still don't know how much longer I have to live, but however much time I have left, I'm going to spend it living authentically rather than trying to keep everyone else happy at the expense of my own well-being. The house I fought so hard to keep has become a symbol of my independence and my right to determine my own future. Every morning when I wake up in my own bed, surrounded by my memories, I'm reminded that I chose this life for myself. Family isn't just about blood relationships. It's about who shows up for you when things get difficult, who respects your choices, even when they disagree, who loves you for who you are, rather than what you can give them. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this. It's never too late to start standing up for yourself. It's never too late to set boundaries. It's never too late to choose your own happiness over other people's expectations. I spent 70 years being the person everyone else needed me to be. I'm spending whatever years I have left being the person I choose to be. And let me tell you, it's the most free I've ever felt in my entire life. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt taken advantage of by family members, or struggled to set boundaries with people you love, I want you to know that you're not alone. Hit that like button if this story moved you. Subscribe for more real stories about family, betrayal, and finding your strength. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that they have the right to put themselves first sometimes. Because at the end of the day, you can't take care of everyone else if you don't take care of yourself first. And you deserve to be treated with the same respect and kindness you've spent your life giving to others.